you can give us a more thorough introduction when we get around to you.
Okay.
But I'm David Durfee. I'm chair of the committee, and I'm from Shaftesbury and represent Sunderland and Glastonbury as well. Probably know Rodney.
Rodney Graham, Williamstown, Chelsea.
Never met, but I know him. Nice to meet you.
Jed Lipsky represents Stowe and Weld County.
Henry Pearl, Danville, Peacham, and Cabot.
Charles Wilson, Caledonia 3, Linden, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and Newark.
Yeah.
I'm David Templeman, Barton, Brownington, and Westmore.
Mike Rice, represent the Bennington, Rutland districts, towns of Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
John O'Brien, Royalton and Tunbridge.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford.
Heather Supernaut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
And remember all of them.
Hey, that's okay.
We've also got a
Sorry.
committee member joining us on Zoom, I think. Representative Levitt, are you still there?
I am. I'm Josie Levitt, sick, but represent Grandal Chittenden, which is all of Grandal County and West Milton.
That's it. That's everybody. Laura Rich is our committee assistant.
Yes, hi, and I think John is on now. If
Oh, good.
he can hear us and wants to turn his camera on and say hi.
All right.
But
Okay. John, if you can hear us and want to say hello, that's great. If you're not quite ready, that's fine too.
I
So,
apologize, Mr. Chair, for, I just got a new computer from, and I realized as I was trying to get on that I had not installed Zoom yet, so I had to just go through that process. So, but glad to be joining you.
so John is State Executive Director. Is that right, John, for USDA?
That's correct, yes. Former dairy farmer for 40 years in Cornwall, Vermont, just outside Middlebury. Then worked for the Agency of Ag as one of their water quality specialists. Then worked as executive director of the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition. And then I was asked to do this job. And I've been on board for a little over a year.
And are you, doesn't really matter where you are at this very moment, but do you work out of an office in somewhere in
Yes.
the state?
Yes, I'm today I'm in Colchester at our headquarters for USDA, FSA in my office in Colchester. And 2 days of the week, they do let me work from my home. So, which is nice, but, and I apologize that I could not be there in person. I just had it's a busy day of meetings today.
Well, we want to thank both of you for joining us and for coming in a little earlier than we had originally scheduled you to. Do we have, you were asked on short notice to come in, so I don't know whether either of you has anything that you wanted to share with us on screen. If not, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I don't have anything, to be honest, really shareable. It's very handwritten notes right now, but I'm happy to send to Alora a copy of particularly the statistics or the numbers that I'm planning on sharing with you.
Okay. And have the two of you, not suggesting that you should have, but have you talked at all in advance of coming in today and know who's going to speak first?
Dan has graciously asked me to speak first. he did just exchange an email. We have not coordinated our testimony in any other way.
Okay, all right,
I'm used to playing cleanup, so,
okay.
and I think you have the primary witness to explain the program if that's what you want. So and I can fill in as you would like.
Okay. Well, then, John, if you want to go ahead, if I see anyone in the committee looking like they really want to ask a question, I'll interrupt you and let that happen. And Representative Levitt on Zoom, you can make sure you let us know if you have a question too.
Will do.
Okay. Well, the DMC program, as it's known, dairy marketing program, is it's kind of an insurance policy for dairy farmers. It assesses basically the difference between, and I'm speaking in very broad terms here, the difference between their feed costs for 100 pounds of milk and their pay price. And when that margin, as it's called, becomes within a certain guidelines, the government will pay the farmers the difference. So, if the pressure gets too intense on the farmers, it will pay them for the margin between the cost of feed and the cost of the price of milk. And farmers have the option to choose the sort of the margin break that they wish to insure to. Most of them insure at the $9 area. And this program has been running for, I think now, about 2 or 3 years. It's before my time with USDA and after my time as a dairy farmer. So I did not personally participate in this program. It was upgraded about 2 years ago to be more reflective of the feed pressures. And one thing that should be noted is it does not really help the organic dairy farmers as well. So the whole thing is based at this time on a conventional dairy marketing price. And I'm sure you've had testimony in the last year that, last few months probably, that organic dairy farmers are under extreme pressure. So this year, 2023, we have signed up, FSA has signed up 423 dairy operations. I'll call it dairy operations because it's based on ownership and everything. It may not precisely reflect the dairy farm, but number of dairy farms. But roughly, we have about 75 to 80% of the dairy farms that presently exist in Vermont are signed into this program. It is equal to about 2.12 billion pounds of milk. So a substantial amount of the milk that is produced in Vermont. The premiums calculated are $1,461,064. Of that, premium calculated, 1,332,226 has been paid to the farmers. And in this calendar year, so far, we, the federal government, have paid out to dairy farmers 3.9 million. Now, I have to just say that I'm not 100% sure the person who manages this program for us in the state of Vermont happens to be on vacation right now. I was not able to touch base with her to find out, was the 3.9 million paid out? Was that as of April 1st, March 1st, exactly which months it covers? All the predictions are that there will be several months this year, particularly now and later in the year, when there will be a payout. I think about half the number of months in the year there will be a payout. As you, I'm sure, know, the price of milk varies month to month, and so does the cost of feed. And last year in particular, there were huge disruptions of the cost of feed, brought about partly by drought and, of course, partly by the war in Ukraine, which disrupted world grain markets and continues to disrupt them. We work very closely with the Vermont Agency of Ag, and before she retired, we worked with Diane Bothfeld, and because the state of Vermont has a program to reimburse these farmers. So what we do is when a farmer has paid his premium, we forward his or her name, and the amount they've paid to the Agency of Ag, and then they go about reimbursing them, presumably until such point as they run out of money. But we have a very, very close relationship. I talk with Anson on a fairly regular basis about this and many other ag issues where the relationship between the federal government and the state government needs to be as close as possible. I think that's about all my testimony today, Mr. Chair. So I'm open to any questions that any of you might have.
Okay, thank you. Representative O'Brien.
John, I was just wondering if we know, what was the figure of how many Vermont farms, 400 something?
Contracts was 423. I think, I think we have 530 dairy farms in the state right now.
So do we know how many organic dairies had signed up for DMC?
I'm sorry, I cannot answer that. I will make a note of that and see if I can get an answer. We usually don't ask the farmers if they are organic or conventional. All we're interested in is, are they dairy farmers? But I will ask that question and see if I can get you an answer.
And there's still a $5 million cap?
Sorry, say that again, please.
But 5 million pounds, right? Cap.
Oh, yes. That is the upper limit, which, just roughly is, for a organic dairy, that's a fairly big farm. It's probably close to 300 cows, if not over. For a conventional farm, it's more like 225 to 250. I would guess at, kind of based on what, we milk 200 cows and usually produced about 4.5 million pounds of milk.
John, if I could, John, if I could, the 5 million is the cap on the first tier, right, John?
Yes, sorry, you're absolutely right, Dan. Yeah, there is, they can pay, they can buy for the second tier. The reimbursement by the state is only for the first tier payment.
Yeah. So you can protect your margin on the first tier up to 5 million pounds at the 950 level. And then for any milk above that, I think it's $4 or $4.50. So it's really just kind of a catastrophic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this related? You mentioned there was a $9 or around $9 margin break then. So is tier 2 or tier 1 and 2, the first tier and the second tier, related to margin breaks, or?
Yes, that's right. So you can protect the first 5 million pounds at the high, at any level up to 950 and for 5 million pounds. And like John's saying, a 300 cow odd dairy. And then for above that, I think it's only at the 450 level. So it's really would be only when either feed prices really skyrocketed or milk prices really crashed or some combination of both. So it's really a very thin margin protection above the 5 million. So it's really geared, to John's point, towards the smaller operations. And Senator Leahy really accomplished that as part of this program to aim it towards the smaller scale operations.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I should probably have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I didn't mean to jump in, John. I'm sorry.
No, go. I'm used to that, Dan.
We're happy to have you tag team. So, but I just want to be sure that since I think we weren't live earlier when we started, that the public knew who you were if they were tuning in.
So my name's Dan Smith. I am an ex-legislative counselor. That's my main qualification. I don't have a client. I'm here, as you said, Senator Starr and I were co-chairs of a task force that the legislature created a couple years to look at milk price regulation. And as part of that work, we heard testimony about this program and the benefits that might be provided if the legislature were to cover premiums. So you guys asked me to come in, I think, talk about that. I worked for the council from 1987 to 1992. I think this was the Commerce Committee at the time. And then I worked for almost 10 years on the Northeast Dairy Compact. And then after that, I've kind of split. I'm a lawyer. I've split my career between doing different trade law, basic law work and milk market regulation projects around the country. I've never worked for dairy farmers. I've always primarily worked for states, trying to sort through state milk price regulation. And I've participated in federal order hearings over the years around the country. So my expertise is on the fluid milk marketing side from having administered the Northeast Dairy Compact. So I understand milk market regulation to the extent anybody really understands milk market regulation and the federal order program and the fluid milk market. So that's.
I think when we were thinking about how to structure our schedule this week, thought we would spend some time on this, on the program.
Yeah.
Understanding that we may get legislation from the Senate that talks about the insurance, the state's contribution to the premiums, and extending that for next year, and then possibly, if we still have time in the session after we've covered everything else we need to cover, or even if we don't, we might have you back to talk in more depth about milk pricing.
Okay.
Which I think would be great, just babackground for all of us to have. I guess, so other questions based on what we just heard from John Roberts that anyone has? I guess maybe a question I'll ask, and maybe it's not for John, but for you, Dan, is, and if you don't have the answer, we can find out from someone else, I'm sure, but whether this is the state covering the premium at 100% currently?
Yeah, so I think that's for me, John.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's covering, my understanding of the program, where this is the second year that the state has reimbursed the dairy farmers. I believe that the state appropriated, was it 2.5 million, Dan?
It was 2.6.
2.6 million.
Yeah.
And they used about 1.4 million last year, 1.5 million. And I think there was some concern that maybe they wouldn't have enough money to cover everything for this year. I mean, this is, I'm the feds, so I'm talking out of turn a little bit. And we've had, I believe, slightly higher sign up this year because last year was, so disastrous, or I shouldn't say that, but even with the very high milk price, there was payouts last year. And it just reflected the fact that the margin between feed costs and even a fairly substantial pay price, the margin was still, very enough to cause payouts. So, and I think based on that assumption and based on the fact that throughout this winter, I know that the co-ops, Extension Service and others were really urging dairy farmers to sign up, that we got, back up to nearly the 80%. And you're never going to get, 100%. I personally know a couple of dairy farmers who are just, they're farmers, and you know what farmers are like, and they don't want anything to do with the government if they can possibly avoid it, and so they won't sign up for this kind of assistance, and that's just the way it is. And then I think there are possibly there may be some very big farms, although they are usually very business oriented. So I'm speculating here a little bit. There may be some very small farms who don't want to pay the premium, even if they think it's reimbursed. So we've got, as I said, we have 2.12 billion pounds of milk signed up out of a total, I think Vermont's total production in a year is around 2.3 billion. So we may not have all the dairy farms, but we pretty much have 95% of the milk.
Representative Pearl, had a question? Dan, did you want to?
Let's see. To your question, the state is paying up to the tier 1 level, up to 5 billion pounds of milk. The state's not covering anything premium wise above the tier 1, and it's paying up to the 950 level. So farmers who sign up can sign up to 5 million pounds at the 950, and the state will reimburse them for the premiums. So it was intended to encourage participation in the program where it paid the most for the smaller scale operations. So I think it's reasonable to expect that virtually all of the commercial farms at 423 are in. And, you know, some of the farmstead operations are probably not. And like John's saying, some farms that don't want to have anything to do with the government are not involved. The last year before the war, milk prices were on their way up, and farmers tend to not sign up when they don't think the program's going to pay anything. And then it became pretty apparent that the program's going to pay a lot this year. So in 2021, the program paid out a total of $1.2 billion around the country. And the average was about $62,000 a farm. And that was about the average here in Vermont. It was a little bit less, but basically we hit the average pretty close. And I tried to run the numbers of what it looks like this year, and it's kind of hard to do because we're very early, but it looks like it's going to pay something on the order of that again. So I think farmers, they have a terrific, if you Google dairy margin coverage, USDA has a terrific website with both a summary webpage of by state and total, and then they have a diagnostic tool where farmers can go on and look at the projected prices and see what it might get paid out. And working with that a little bit, it could pay another $60,000 a farm this year, which, you know, it's a lot of money. I think that that's the reason so many farms signed up. Just by way of numbers, they kind of get out away from you. Vermont produces closer to 2.6 billion pounds of milk, John. So there is a chunk of milk in there that's not in the program. I have a feeling it's on the big. I don't know. No, they don't report the pounds of milk. They report the numbers of farms and the amount paid out per farm by state. They don't report the volume of milk in the different tiers, so it's a little hard to see. But I'm not sure. I think if you're business oriented, like John is saying, the likelihood it was going to pay out anything at the upper tier, even though the premium isn't very expensive, I have a feeling there's a lot of that milk that's not in. And most of the milk that is in is at the lower where the state's paying. And that's, you know, to the primary point, I think, of why you're talking is what John said, that if the state put out 1.5 last year and has 1.1 roughly left, that's not going to be enough because more farms signed up. There's more milk in the program this year. So we tried to look at that. So if, 1.5 last year, a little bit more milk this year would be 1.9. So the task force recommended an additional $800,000. And I heard from Ledge Council that Senator Starr is working with the Ag Department to come up with a tighter number to give to you guys. But it's in that $800,000 ballpark that no producers would get left out of the premium coverage. The way it was set up, it's first in, first out. So if farmers at the tail end of the application process are the ones that would get, there's no means testing or anything like that. It's just if you're at the back end of the application. So I think it would, be very important for the state to make good on that, so everybody's treated equally.
Representative O'Brien.
Sorry, can I just add? Sorry to interrupt, but add to Dan. I mean, as I said, we've got 2.1, a little over 2.1 million, billion pounds of milk, and right now the premiums that farmers have to pay for this year are over $1.461 million. So if there's only $1.1 million, this is sort of adding to what Dan is saying about that if the state wishes to do this, they need more money.
It doesn't sound like you're going to need the whole 800 then. So that's good news. That's good news. Yeah.
John, did you have a question?
Dan, do we have numbers? I think I've heard them from you before of what the payout was. That's essentially an investment type of way. Vermont paid premiums. How much came back to the dairy farmers those first 2 years?
Yeah. So last year, not a whole lot, which we knew going in. it looks to be around, I think, John, you have the numbers around $5 million last year to Vermont?
I wasn't prepared for that question, so I'm having a quick.
That may be high. So if 400 and change farms, 6,000 looks to be maybe 2.5 million last year. The premium cost would have been pretty close to the same. So pretty much a wash last year. But this year, if it pays on the order of 60, the premium cost is around $5,000 a farm, give or take. If it's going to pay out $60,000, the state's in, that's going to be 10 to 1, 11, 12 to 1, something like that against what the state's put up. So we hedged against an unforeseen development. It was before the Ukrainian war we put this together. It happened because we saw milk prices going up. So as John said, you're protecting against the milk price and the feed cost. So if the milk price was going to go up, then the margin that's being protected was going to be higher. The likelihood it wasn't going to pay, but then the feed price went up, caught up with the milk price. So it's about to pay out a lot of money. So the state is going to get a return on its investment this year. Pretty substantial, I believe.
John, do other states have a similar program where they reimburse the premiums?
That's a very interesting question, Mr. Chair. And I haven't heard of that. That's something I could follow up on. It wouldn't, I suppose, surprise me, but it might surprise me too. Every state is different. So I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Other questions? Right, yeah, sorry, Bradley.
I don't really have a question, but I have a comment to make. It's not really directed at either one of you, but personally, very disappointed that the state or USDA does not want to do anything to help out organic farms. I mean, the state participated in a program of trying to convert small farms to organic a number of years ago. Now they're struggling and no one wants to do anything. They just want to let them go. And I'm very disappointed that, nobody has offered to do anything to help out organic farms.
It might be dangerous for me to comment, but I do know, the federal government is coming out with a program they call the Organic Dairy Marketing Assistance Program. I'm a little disappointed about how slow it has been to get the rules out about that. It is not it's not like the DMC program. However, I and several other state directors have urged USDA, as I believe certainly our Vermont congressional delegation has urged USDA to recalculate the DMC program so it takes into account organic dairy farmers. I think what's happened to organic dairy farmers in the last year caught probably a lot of people by surprise, mainly about how vicious it was or has been and continues to be, that their milk price did not reflect the realities in the marketplace, whereas the conventional price seemed to be able to do that in many ways. And but I and other SEDs have urged a USDA to look at this again and be more receptive to an organic, recalculation or whatever it is. The only thing I have learned working for, or one of the things I've learned working for the federal government is, they advance at the speed of a herd of turtles. It just is the way it is. I hope that they will come out with something. I can't say any more than that because I don't know anymore. But you are right, sir, that it's a shame that this wasn't thought about sooner. And Vermont is sort of unique. I believe percentage-wise, we have more organic dairy farmers than just about every other state. And unfortunately, they're getting less day by day almost, or week by week.
If I could, there's quite a bit of discussion 10 years ago about a carve out for organic farmers in the federal order program. There was a lot of movement in that direction, and it just kind of petered out. So when the organic industry was not in need, there was a discussion about something that could be responsive. And when this happened, and I wasn't directly involved, but aware, and I don't know why the impetus, there was some discussion about doing something in this farm bill to create some kind of a parallel federal order for organic milk, and that discussion stopped. There's also, since this program was created in the last farm bill, which is 5 odd years ago, there was discussion about having a parallel program where you're looking, obviously organic feed prices are the big kicker. And I would not be surprised if that gets into this farm bill, that there is some adaptation of the DMC program to cover organic. There's a lot of pushback about not treating all dairy farmers the same. That's the pushback. But the cost in the end, because it's not that much milk, it's a milk-based program, would not be that high. So I think something might happen in this farm bill in direct response to your concern. At the state level, the task force was addressing price regulation. We get into this because of all the COVID money that came out. And Virginia actually has this program, and we used it as a model. And at that time, the crash in organic hadn't happened. But as we were getting testimony that there was an imminent problem developing, we, in the draft legislation that you'll review, there is a direct distinction made in the proposal to update the milk price regulation program to distinguish between organic and conventional, so that the two could be addressed differently. So movement in the direction you're suggesting.
Representative Pearl.
2 questions. Are DMC and MPP the same thing?
That's a great question, and I if I could talk for just 2 minutes, and
sure.
And so you got to back up one step before the MPP program to the MILC program, and then the Dairy Compact. So the Dairy Compact went out of business in the fall of 2001. There's enough people that remember Senator Jeffords changed parties, and he didn't make any deals. Man of principle, no deals. And the steam went out of the compact effort when Senator Jeffords changed parties. Another way to put it. After that fact, he went to Senator Daschle and made a deal. And the MILC program was the direct consequence of that. Dairy never has subsidy program. You have minimum pricing and a support price. The support price was the floor for the regulatory program. It's not a subsidy. So cotton, wheat, subsidy programs, dairy, regulatory program. MILC took the dairy compact price, which was the Boston Class 1 price minus 1694. That was the premium, the over order premium. Federal order minimum, dairy compact over order, 6-state amount above the federal minimum, but added on to the Class 1 price. So it came out of the market, wasn't a subsidy program. So the deal that Senator Jeffers made with Senator Daschle was to take that amount, and the thinking was to get the rest of the country to like the dairy compact because they took our price. And so they took the price, they took the utilization, which was 45%. And they said to dairy farmers all over the country, if the Boston price it goes below 1694, everybody in the country is going to get the difference up to 2.4 million pounds of milk on your farm. So they capped it. The net result was almost 5 billion pounds of milk paid, $5 billion paid out as a subsidy. So the dairy compact was a regulatory, a combination interstate regulation, take the money out of the market. Got converted by politics, what can I say, into this subsidy program. So I'm not a subsidy guy, and I got turned into a subsidy that paid out $5 billion, kind of a strange experience. So that program, it got too expensive. So they create, and also, it really was not rational market based because you're paying off the Boston Class 1 pricing dynamic in Idaho. Now, the Class 1 utilization, 45% in Boston, 8% in Idaho. There was no rhyme or reason to that. So they reinvented the MILC program in 2014 Farm Bill and pegged the price to what John described, the margin between the feed price and the milk price. That's the margin protection program. But the calculation didn't really work out. And so in the 2018 Farm Bill, they rewrote the program into DMC. So you go dairy compact to MILC in this odd conversion, and then MILC to margin protection, which was irrational. Go to a margin protection, and then the latest iteration, which is really now it's a functional subsidy program. You've got Senator Leahy's crafting so that it's aimed towards the smaller farms, and the premiums are adjusted to a margin of a smaller farm, so it's affordable, and it's paying out substantial amounts of money in a counter-cyclical manner that is effective. So the dairy margin protection that you asked was kind of in the middle there was the invention of a margin protection program. It was the trial run 10 years ago. That's now morphed into DMC. So
I think that answers my second question, was that there was from talking to farmers, there was some hesitance of signing up because they felt like they had signed up in that earlier section.
Exactly.
The calculation wasn't working. So they were like, I'm not going to spend the money on insurance that doesn't pay out. And okay.
You got it. Okay. You got it. And I think we've all been around government programs that never get really fixed. Senator Leahy really did a good fix to this one. It really works. But the net result is it's going to cost a lot of money. I mean, if it's going to work, it's paid. I added it up. It paid, it's close to $3 billion. It's getting on to $3 billion now. So but it's real money. In being counter-cyclical, when one of those two things happen, the milk price crashes or the feed price spikes, it's paid on the order of $3 to $4 a hundredweight. It's real money.
So just to be clear, the program is not intended to be self-supporting. Is there
a great question. It's an insurance company that's not self-supporting.
So
not even close.
The taxpayers are paying federally for this program through the Farm Bill.
Correct. So if the premium is $5,000 a farm in 2019 paid $20,000 a farm. Taxpayers
Picked up the tab.
15. In 2021 paid $62,000 a farm. Taxpayers picked up $57,000 a farm.
There could be other years where it's more or less, or conceivably a year where feed costs were so low and the milk price so high that they're.
Yeah, great question.
Of cost to tax.
The only year was last year. But it was really a break-even year. Yeah. Hey, you got what you paid in.
Representative Temple?
So, okay, so it's a cost to the taxpayers, but then we have a reduced milk price, if I understand it correctly, right? Like milk prices are controlled and they're kept low so that, no?
No, I'm sorry, Dan.
Pop my bubble.
The milk prices, the current pricing program is a price discovery mechanism. The USDA does a survey of what manufactured milk plants are willing to pay for milk given marketing conditions. And then they do a complex formula to develop a series of prices to charge to processors to create a minimum floor price that will ensure stability of supply over time. And then that price moves around depending on what the market does.
So the objective is to stabilize the production, not the price.
Correct.
Got it. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
And this program being counter-cyclical is designed to stabilize the price.
Right.
Yeah. Which is what the compact was a counter-cyclical program intended to intervene when prices crashed. The compact stepped in and charged to the market to bring the price up to where it had been. And that's essentially what this does, but against the feed price. So it's trying to stabilize the price that producers get paid against their feed costs to try to create some stability. That's not in the federal program anymore. Used to be, but it's not anymore. So the government is and this would be to the next level of discussion. The federal government's insuring against its own regulatory program.
Yeah. It's catching on to.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. And so, like I said, that's the next level. Is there some role for the state to say, if you get the money out of the market, which is what price regulation does and what the compact did, then you don't have to get it out of taxpayers. I mean, that's the long and the short of it.
Representative O'Brien.
So I think this is happening with organic now is the margins totally disappeared or actually gone the other way. Did that happen with conventional? And if that happened, what?
Yeah, great question. So to John's point, the war has caused turmoil and increase in price in the feed side. Last year, milk prices coming out of COVID were high. So the feed price, the farm price was way up. And when the feed price climbed, there was still a margin protection there. So this program didn't pay me. But now the milk price has come down. Feed price come down a little bit, right, John, but not much. So the margin has shrunk. So this program is going to pay. Milk prices are up still, but feed prices are way up. On the organic side, it just, there's this odd, you have the Ukraine situation and then some disruption to a primary supply out of India that's really blown up the organic feed price. And that's why it just seems like, a dairy margin coverage program that accounted for that completely different market niche of organic feed. If you're going to have a program, make it rational to fit that niche of the market seems like something to be done. So I know for sure they'll talk about it. Whether they'll do it remains to be seen.
And I just add to what Dan said. One of the problems, of course, is that we import most organic grain. Only a relatively small portion of the organic grain that organic livestock farmers wish to buy is grown in the United States. And, when you have a situation like India, where, just as a sort of example, and I'm not, please don't quote me on these numbers, but it's just, they're roughly right, a 40-foot container just to lease the container to ship your grain, and a substantial amount of grain came in containers, and it doesn't always come loose in bulk cargo ships. But during COVID, it went from like $2,500 to ship a container across the Pacific to $45,000 to ship a container across the Pacific. My numbers may be off, but the general picture is not. It was just a staggering increase in shipping costs. And then there were further, India had, I believe, some climate issues that further disrupted. It's just, we are too dependent on imported organic feed, really.
We wrote the Organic Standards Act, the first Organic Standards Act at the state level. In 1991, and we had testimony at that time that it would promote the development of an organic feed business. But Vermont had gotten out of the grain feed business, so never really took hold. But it surely was a market opportunity in the last 30 years that just never took hold. So the industry is dependent on the importation of grain, which is a shame.
I was at a meeting earlier today with NRCS, my counterparts, and they were talking in this meeting about the Inflation Reduction Act. And I believe there is money in the Inflation Reduction Act, which will be funneled through NRCS to promote farmers to convert to organic production. It's not focused specifically on grain by any stretch, but it is focused on the organic industry. I do not know the details at all, but it's a substantial sum of money. And it will be advertised shortly. I believe they will are putting out some notices on farmers.gov to tell farmers about that program.
John, I think we're going to wrap it up. And I wanted to thank you for coming in, Dan, you as well. Speaking of substantial amounts of money, if there's anything you can do about that 100 million, which I think we've heard calculates to $2 hundredweight for the organic farmers that they're desperately in need of. So,
yep. No, I share your concern. Yep.
Thank you for this background. Very helpful. Just getting a sense of what the program is, and if we have other questions, we may reach out in the future and hope to see you in person at some point.
It was a pleasure meeting with you all today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a